Elevator systems. Bowen family systems theory in brief for a life of learning. Welcome to Elevator Systems, where we look at ideas and concepts from Bowen family systems theory in brief and hopefully understandable ways. We are nearing the end of our relationships across the lifespan season, and the topic for this episode is aging. Now, of course, aging has been happening throughout the entire lifespan, but today we are really thinking about aging in the later years. And joining us today is someone with some life experience in this area. As of this recording, she is nearing her 85th birthday. We have Selden Dunbar Illick with us today. Welcome, Selden.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here and looking forward to this conversation.
So Selden has been studying Bowen theory for over 40 years. She is especially interested in the application of Bowen family systems theory to family functioning in the present as it connects to the multigenerational past and to future generations, especially the concept of emotional cutoff between generations and degrees of unresolved emotional attachment. As Selden puts it, she has spent decades in a continuing effort to better understand and clarify the impact of the unresolved on present functioning, which sounds fascinating. Selden founded the Princeton Family Center for Education in 1987 and currently serves on the board. And these days, she continues to be a consultant to those interested in applying Bowen theory perspectives to their lives. So Selden, you get the first pitch on how Bowen theory is useful in aging.
Thank you. I'll give it my best shot so far. Just like you said, aging begins when we're born. And that's the moment we begin to age. But the way that we handle the hand we are dealt affects the ways that we can maintain viable emotional contact between the generations in our families. And this makes a difference to the quality of our lives and the health the family enjoys when we are elderly. And this is fascinating to me because I think a lot about aging being, now, what am I going to do when I retire, and what trips do I want to take, and things like that. But this Bowen perspective is just beautiful and right out of theory. So it'll be interesting to talk about it today.
Yeah. Excellent. Katie, your turn.
So I think it's been echoed quite a bit. Part of my pitch, I always say we don't talk about this beforehand. So I want to think with you today about all of the concepts and how I get more thoughtful in thinking about this aging process. And I'm going to do something I haven't done, I don't think, before, is I'm going to quote someone else as my pitch because I thought they said it so well. So I started this season talking about the Family Life Cycle book, and I am going to read a quote that I thought summed up aging so well. They talk about it through the lens of the family life cycle. And they said the family life cycle, this process highlights the view that central underlying process to be negotiated is the expansion, contraction, and realignment of the relationship to support the entry, exit, and development of family members in a functional way. I just thought that was summed up so concisely to speak about if you're thinking family systems, the journey is watching how family members respond as exits happen, as entries happen, as stressors occur, as tension rises. So I think that is the resource that I have found. I haven't been at it nearly as long as Selden, only about 10 or 15 years, but the usefulness in thinking about my system as I'm and the relationships as I'm journeying through it. So Dixie, what have you got?
My pitch was something I was going to use for the launching episode, which once again highlights how this is all throughout life. So I thought of the concept of over and under functioning and how individuals and families think through changes in capacity as people age, along with what kind of help is given to manage what limitations may show up. So the idea of over under functioning is that there are times or relationships when people maybe helping or directing, steering things too much. And there are times when some are maybe not helpful enough to what the reality of a situation warrants. And so my question in this pitch is, how do people know the difference between over and under functioning in an aging process? Or what is the Goldilocks amount of help that is just right? What criteria do people use? Whose criteria do people use? And I think thinking about this idea connects a lot with the adjustment of sort of shifting generational roles and sort of passing the baton. So that was the concept that came to mind for me. And then I have two quotes from Dr. Bowen from the Murray Bowen Archives Project. There was a conference on aging, I guess, in 1985. Selden, were you there?
No, this was the one that I have references 1976. He talked about aging and had the first conference from the Georgetown Family Center on aging.
Okay. Yeah. So this quote is from a conference in 1985. He says, "You see, what happens is the more immature the adults in the family, the more they will try to make infants out of the old. And the more they create infants out of the old, the more they create the same damn thing that happened when they were kids. And it is possible to permit these elderly people to make decisions for themselves. They are aware of reality, and it is possible to give them support while they decide for themselves. And if they can decide for themselves, they are more adequate versus those old people that become wards of their do-gooding kids. I believe that do-gooding kids probably do more harm to their parents than almost anybody." And then he talks, one other quote is, I think it was from that same conference. "In the beginning, one was a child living with overpowering parents, and the problem was to develop a self in relationship to the parents. And in relation to a dogmatic parent, you're not going to make much headway. When the parents become infirm, the situation is reversed. Now the parents are helpless, and the middle generation is the important one. The parent who takes in elderly people to live with them gains a level of differentiation of self that they would never gain with anybody else." So bringing in that older generation. That's all I have
That's good.
for, yeah.
Well, that's a lot. But that over under functioning, it's all relevant. Every part of Bowen theory is relevant to every other part. Eventually, some more directly than others, but that over under functioning point that you're making is so important in this and in this process and in this intergenerational process. And the woman that died yesterday, I mean, she didn't die yesterday, but I went to her service. I always try to take something from everybody I love when they die, then try and make it more of me. But even when she was alive, one time, I was being very bossy about a family reunion, and she was helping. And she said, "Let's just pause a minute and take a look at the bigger picture. What is it that you're trying to accomplish here?" And my son said, "Boy, Mom, that's a breath of fresh air." And I took heart from that moment on, and I thought, oh, I got to be quiet. And I've got to ask questions. And I think part of this over under functioning is how open the family is in their ability to ask what a person wants and what they don't want. And very often I've heard in families, an older person might say, "I'll tell you if I need something. You don't need to keep asking." But that's a pretty well adjusted older person. Another kind could, go to her friend and say, "Can't believe how awful my kids are. They're always asking me what I want." Anyway,
Or not asking enough, maybe.
or not asking enough. Very delicate balance. But in an open relationship, according to Bowen, people can say what's on their mind to another who can hear it. And anyway, Katie, you must have something to say.
I felt like I wanted that second quote you read, Dixie. I was wanting more information. So I'm interested in the idea that moving a parent, into a household as they're aging increases. I think you said increases one's level of differentiation. Because I was thinking that's a very Western idea, because I think other cultures, the grandparent would be in the household, or the parent, the grandparent, the parent would be in the household potentially throughout that life cycle. So it got my curiosity piqued. So I'm going to think more about that one.
My assumption with that quote was that it's and maybe Selden could speak to this, that it brings that maybe the unresolved in the parental relationship. I mean, it is always sort of there, but you're not always breathing the same air as your parent, and having them that close in later years, and with these shifting roles and responsibilities. Do you think that unresolved piece might
I imagine
be a part of that?
Quite a bit of variation in that.
Yeah. But, I want to give just a little background in this. I think that is not a system statement that if you move in with your parent, or you bring your parent in with you, you can work on differentiation, but you also cannot.
Yeah.
Right.
And the background of all of this that I just found out, I think that Bowen was very concerned in 1976, because that was sort of an emphasis on creating other spaces to separate the elderly from all the younger generations, and put them in nursing homes or in a home like I'm in. And then he had these ranges of disabilities. I mean, if you're demented, then you're all together in that place. And if you're, you can't walk, you're with another group of similar things, and you don't have this intergenerational experience. So I think that statement comes out of his concern that the elderly were being separated and sanctioned off,
Right.
isolated. And so that's a whole part of society to really look at in those generations.
And I think, Selden,
see,
it's such a useful thing to say, why context is important,
Right.
in thinking
That's
about these
right.
things.
That's exactly right. So this is the context in which he was developing these ideas about aging. Now, and I will say that he's absolutely right, that I have seen in particular two examples that really stand out, where a mother and daughter didn't get along at all. The daughter became an alcoholic. She decided to get sober and go home and live with her mother. And they did have a Bowen coach, not me, but somebody. And they were able, over the period of a year, to be able to look at each other differently, and change their foothold or change the basis from which they related. And that's true to this day. The other thing is, there were two kids that were separated by divorce, and their mother was an alcoholic, and she got cancer and was dying. The two boys didn't like each other. Everybody had different fraught relationships with their mother. These two boys went home to be with their mother, take care of their mother. And at the end of their mother's life, they were able to talk in the most beautiful way about what they learned about the beauty of their mother, and how they saw how they got in the way. And they didn't have any Bowen theory. So one of my questions about all of this, Bowen said, I'm not trying to change the world, I'm trying to understand it. And so I do believe that there is an urge, which he has talked about, in people to do better. And these boys needed to do better when, this was the crisis, and this was their opportunity, but they took it. They didn't leave from it. And there have been tons of cutoff in that family. So
mean,
it can happen.
yeah. My question is, what are the multi-generational, or what is the culture, I'm going to use this word, of the family, or the principles that allow a person to say, I'm going to go do this hard thing? Because I think, both of those stories, none of those were like, ooh, this is going to be a great fun time, I'm going to jump into it. But are people saying there is something, principle, belief, family culture, something that's making them say, maybe it's the idea that Papero keeps asking about, or they're saying that Bowen said about what is the glue that keeps us together? Something in the system that's saying, I'm going to go do this hard thing. That's the part that I find really interesting.
Well, it's kind of fascinating because one of the things that Bowen talks a lot about in Cutoff is the denial of the importance of the family. And when there's all this emotional charged reactivity and intensity, people are saying, I don't give a damn about my family. And I'm going to go with my friends, or I'm going to get this marriage. And oh, by the way, I'll get another one, another one. And I don't know. I think it's such a great question. And it would be interesting. I think I'll go ask those people what motivated them to do this, because it's a courageous step, but it also might be a very necessary step. I mean, I didn't have this kind of drama in my family, but I had a lot of drama. And it finally, in learning Bowen theory and realizing, watching that emotional cutoff tape that Bowen made with Kathleen Yanks, she was talking about being polite with her mother. And I'd learned enough about Bowen theory and being responsible for self and being a self. I thought, I'm not a self. And this concept does apply to me. And that made a big difference to sort of begin to realize, as much as I was upset, this family made a huge difference to me, and it made a difference to me to be in the family and hold my own. Bob Noon has a great way of talking about this, having emotional autonomy in the family. And I would see it as emotional autonomy in the interdependence of the multi-generational process.
Because I would imagine there could be, as much of a differentiated, clear move for self to say, I don't think my parents should be in my home. I will stay connected to them, but I think I'm clear that wouldn't be the best move for me or this relationship. I think thinking through the content is, people could hear this and say, move your parents in your home. That's the way you grow a better self. And I think that would be missing the point of, how does the person just get clear, like Dixie asked, how they want to be helpful, how they think about that, how they get interested in the relationship.
That's so good. And I think, Bowen really does talk about an emotional cutoff. The first mechanism is denial of the importance of the family. But then he has two other mechanisms to manage that. One is to live in the family and internally cut off. And the other is to physically move away. And so it's just a matter of sort of putting all these things together and really assessing. I mean, my mother and grandmother had a scratchy relationship. My grandmother lived to be 104. And at about 90, she got kind of sick. And she and my mother talked about their living together. And they both decided it was a bad idea. And she ended up in a home. But my mom was in contact with her all the time. We all came to see her. It's the quality.
Yeah.
I think it's it's really more than that. It's how do we think about it? What is our thinking? Is this important or isn't it? Yeah. But back to aging, I just think it's so wonderful to think about it as it is a life process. It's part of our whole lifespan. And how do we look at being grateful to have a life? We're alive. And I love what Mary Oliver said about what are you going to do with your one precious life? And Bowen says, what are you going to do with the hand you're dealt? We've got a chance to do something with what we have and be respectful to other people who are different.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that thinking about it from a lifestyle perspective, being able to watch the generations before me age and be interested in them and think about them, I think that was such a resource in my own growing up life, as I had relationships with both of my grandparents, some better than others. That's, should not tell lies. My paternal grandfather died when I was 2. So less of a relationship with him, but I think that there was something about knowing really the women potentially more than the men, and learning from them and being interested in how they're going about it and how they're going about aging, how they're staying connected to their families, who they were and the choices they made. I think that has been a real useful resource to me.
I had a similar experience, and actually my parents had trouble with their in-laws, but they always said to us, your grandparents are really important, and it's important to stay connected to them.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a value they gave us in the middle of a lot of fraught stuff. But connection was important. But there was a lot of, gossiping in the family about who was okay and who wasn't, and all of that. And one of the things about Bowen theory that's been so helpful to me is not to talk about other people. And if I have to say something, to try to frame it in a way that is understanding of what they're up against. And there's a freedom in that. It's amazing.
I work regularly on that one.
Every day, all the time. And oh my God, it's so exciting to get into it. And it would be let her rip. And I used to. And it didn't really amount to much.
Yeah, I hear it.
My thinking about the generations, I had the question of, because I've heard it a lot recently, is I can't tell my parent or grandparent my problem because they are X number of years old. And I don't know if you guys have heard this before. And my thought is, what is the magic age when a person becomes too old to be able to handle hearing about others' struggles? And do people agree on that age? Is there a criteria for what makes you think a loved one can't handle things? And I just thought it was just a little example of the way we conceptualize aging, or what goes into some people seeing that there being a limit and other people not.
I think that has to do with thinking systems in this way, that we're all a part of it. So if somebody's thinking somebody's too old, what is going on in them to have such an idea? What is their reaction to the age that is keeping them from making the first step? And this whole thing about thinking systems is so fascinating, because we're just a part of a much bigger thing. We're all a part of it. It's not me or them. So that question is so great that you just said, because that's a really them or me in my mind.
Right.
That's how it lands on me. It's not we're all in this together, or, whatever. How do I want to be? I would like to put in 2 questions that Mike Kerr asked one day in the Princeton Family Center training program way back. He said, I have 2 questions for you today. What are you trying to accomplish? And how do you want to represent yourself?
Great questions.
Great questions. And they're really guidelines for almost anything you do, which is amazing. And so back to that person. What are you trying to accomplish with your grandmother? And how do you want to represent you with her?
Right.
I mean, that's where my mind goes. I don't know if that's where.
And I think reciprocally, how do you get interested in what the grandmother is looking at from you? I would be really interested in that reciprocal process of a younger generation saying this older generation isn't useful to me. Has there been reciprocity? I think this was touched on kind of in Bowen's letter. Is there been reciprocity to say these younger people don't know what the hell they're talking about, right? You know,
Yeah.
that shows up coming from both directions.
Exactly. It's a two-way, it's a system. It's a
Right.
relationship. The way it used to be talked about way back in the beginning was that you sort of have a mixing bowl and each person is putting themselves in it. And
Yeah.
what does the mixture look like? Anyway, it's somewhat useful.
Yeah.
But I think the reciprocity and back to open relationships. How does your grandmother think? Do you even know what she thinks about? But it is interesting how dress codes, the way, I mean, I'm of an age that, oh my God, those short skirts and everything else that's all available is really sort of alarming to me, and it scares me a little bit. But that's me. But I can talk about it to my grandchildren.
I saw the greatest picture on Facebook the other day. That was a picture of, it said, younger generation, these were your grandmothers in the 70s, and it was a bunch of women in very short skirts, and I was like, ask them about that.
That's really good because that's right. I mean, we did get very short skirts, but anyway, this is more so. And anyhow, I don't know, but it really, that is a great thing. Hey, Granny, did you ever wear a short skirt? Oh, come to think of it, I did.
Right.
My mom tells a great story about one of her beloved skirts that her mother made her, and she thinks back and about how short that was, that she would never think of that, but remembers that skirt fondly as one of her favorite skirts, and her mom made it for her, knowing that was the style of the day.
Yeah, and back to what you said earlier, Katie, about context is so important. And that's the other thing about intergenerational learning. What was it like when you were growing up? What, my grandmother did not have electricity. And when she was growing up, you lit candles. And she went all the way from that to airplanes to the man on the moon.
Right.
And it's interesting sort of to find out. And it's interesting when you're doing a multi-generational diagram to think about what was the year these people were. Victoria Harrison was very good about how to think about the context.
Yes.
What was going on in the world when these people were born? What was happening in the environment?
Yes.
That is really interesting to look at.
It has been so useful to me. I think I talked about it on our family diagram episode, that, I joked that I didn't know I was going to be a historian when I decided to be a family therapist. But I think it has been so useful to myself and to clients to think about, oh my goodness, there was a civil war. There was a civil war during that time. How does being in a civil war impact the choices that these folks made about immigration and family? And that is a really important context.
It totally is. And my grandmother was born right after the Civil War, but all the effects and the attitudes and everything were entrenched. And I even had a cousin in Virginia who had secede on his license plate, still in the 1980s.
Wow. How do you relate to that?
But I think it's the context in which they were in. We had a whole bunch of cousins that didn't like us because we were Yankees, and we thought they were weird as hell because they were Southerners. And then you had to sort of begin, if you wanted to, and some of us wanted to, try to understand these different contexts which we came out of. but the intensity of the, the differences was big.
Good comment for today's world.
Mm-hmm. Huge. So much.
Yeah.
So much in today's world.
Mm-hmm. I think I've mentioned before, I really love the show called The Midwife.
Oh,
And
yes.
And Jennifer Worth, it's her autobiography that the show is based on. She became a palliative care nurse, and she has a book called In the Midst of Life, Is There Such a Thing as a Good Death? And it looks at how dying changed even in the course of her nursing career, from like maybe the 40s to the 70s, going from, at home to in hospital, that kind of thing. And it made me think, as we were describing at the beginning, the 1976 conference, and Bowen was like, these institutions, or these nursing homes, are showing up. And just the societal, like, what goes into that shift, and how do families make decisions for what's best for their members versus the pressure of society.
And the pressure of the different systems. I think that's a useful comment about, bringing the medical system into there. I think with, I have family in healthcare, and how do you think about, making choices at the end of your life, and what thinking is guiding your own choices versus the pressure of your family members. I mean, my sister has worked a long time in intensive care, and said, these folks are ready to go, and their kids are like, do everything to keep them here, and I think, how do you have conversations prior to sitting in that hospital bed to get some thinking about knowing what your parent wants, knowing how you think about that, opening, I think that's the theme today, a little bit of how to open the system a little bit.
Yeah. And there are families that do sit around and talk about this kind of stuff, and even what they want at their funeral and all that sort of business. But some people don't want to. Don't do that. I was very interested in these therapeutic principles on aging that are in Bowen's article, and wondered if maybe I might add that to this.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Okay. So he said problems of aging provide an excellent example of the common human tendency to frequently react automatically to perceived threat or real threat. And according to the theory, man reacts to anxiety in ways that are governed more by automatic reflex activity than his ability to think and reflect. This relieves the immediate anxiety, but it results in long-term complications and symptoms. It is usual for man to attempt to deal with the complications in the same way he dealt with this originally. And so he was talking about the importance of being the therapeutic move is to help the parents connect to their parents, and children to connect to their parents, to open up the process between the generations. And he found that people did well when they did that. This was his experience over time. And then, as you probably know, Phil Cleaver and Catherine Baker both did serious research projects on this and got the same results. So I think, I'm trying to think about aging as a part of life, and what a gift it is to have life, and think about how you want to age and what you want to accomplish over your lifetime, and think about how important the family is. And if you don't like them, how about taking a step toward and watching yourself so you might engage as a different from stepping away and saying they don't matter.
Yeah. What a great, that was a great summary ending, Dixie.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other takeaways for people?
Mine was very similar to what Selden just said about how do you think about that process and open conversation. I mean, I've just found for 20 plus years of being a family therapist, I cannot name an example where parents and adult children talked about the end of life process where it was not useful to people.
Where it was not what?
Useful.
My husband got Alzheimer's. I have a son and a daughter. They both came to see us by themselves. I was so excited because they were coming alone, and Bowen always said, if your kids come without their kids and their spouses, this is great. Well, they had an idea about doing an intervention on me because they thought that their father could live for a long time, and I was knocking down and rebuilding too many houses, and I needed to change my ways. And the other part was to talk to their father about what he wanted for end of life. And I remember sitting there listening to that and being so astonished at how gracefully my son introduced this question, and how my husband responded, and how we all could begin to participate in this incredible question, which I had never had. My mother got pancreatic cancer, called us all and said, I have this and I'm choosing not to have an operation. I want to continue on morphine, go home, get in my bed, and have everybody come see me. And that was a brand new thing. Yeah. That was before my husband got Alzheimer's, but it was just an introduction in a beautiful way to go with what before had been a scary subject.
Yeah.
So that if people can observe themselves with these ideas and just sit with it for a while, pause, think about it. How would I get more comfortable with this? How can I talk about this? I think it makes a difference.
I was going to add as a takeaway, Dixie, we could link in the show notes. Selden, you reminded me that I found your chapter in the Death and Chronic Illness edited edition so useful in thinking for myself about these ideas. I meant to say that earlier. So I think that would definitely to add that resource for folks who want to think more about this. And maybe I don't know if the aging paper you have of Bowen's is available for public use.
I'll tell you where it is. It's in volume 13 of the Family Systems Journal, volume 13, number 1.
Okay, there we go.
And it's a chapter in that. And of course, I have stacks of these things. Do you think I had that one? No.
Oh.
I had to figure out how to order it and get it online so I could quickly read it. But it is well worth reading for any Bowen student who is working with all these ideas.
Yeah.
And he really, I have to say this, he really said that that the 8 concepts are all important, and he listed them. But he said the 2 most important things for him are emotional cutoff, which deals with the process between the generations, and differentiation. And he says the undifferentiation is equivalent to unresolved emotional attachment. So these findings were wildly exciting for me because this is what I've been, moving around with for a long time. And there it all was.
There you go.
Right there. So thank you very much for a wild opportunity.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for being here today.
The great thing you're doing.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been great to hear your thoughts, your experiences, your decades of theory, knowledge, and still learning. This morning, still learning.
Oh, that is one thing I was going to say, that to still learn, I think being a lifetime learner is something to put in place for life, and it makes a huge difference in aging. And I happen to be living in a retirement home full of lifetime learners of aging who are aging. Some of them, one's about to be 105 and completely with it.
Right. It's amazing.
It is amazing.
Great.
Thank you so much. It's been really interesting.
Thank you.
And wonderful opportunity to think.
Yeah, and I hope the people who've tuned in will take up that call to be learners. And what do you notice as you go out into your relationships? This podcast is produced by Living Systems, a nonprofit organization in Vancouver offering counseling and training programs in Bowen family systems theory across Canada.